A woman was genuinely shocked. Not happy. Not grateful. Shocked. Why? Her boyfriend had just said he would not accept a hall pass to cheat with a celebrity. She couldn't process it. In her mind, it was impossible for a man to refuse guaranteed sex with someone attractive. Impossible that he would choose loyalty over desire. And the most disturbing part, she was offended that he chose to stay with her. This seemingly trivial episode reveals one of the most deeply rooted and destructive beliefs in our society, the idea that men are driven exclusively by sex. That their essence is reduced to animal impulses, incapable of genuine love, of conscious choice, of emotional depth. And the problem is not just that this is a lie. The problem is that this lie has become a manufactured truth, a self-fulfilling prophecy that destroys men from the inside while blaming them for being exactly what the system forced them to become. Because here is the issue no one wants to face. When you treat someone like an animal for long enough, when you systematically deny their most basic emotional needs, when you ridicule any attempt at vulnerability, when you turn affection into a bargaining chip and then act surprised when that person develops a dysfunctional relationship with intimacy, who is really responsible? The dominant narrative is simple and convenient. Men want sex, women want emotional connection. Men are visual and superficial, women are deep and complex. Men cheat because they can't control themselves, women forgive because they are emotionally superior. This story is told and retold millions of times, in movies, series, bar conversations, therapy offices, divorce courts. It is the founding myth of our modern relationships. But there is a parallel reality that rarely gets a voice. A reality where men go months, sometimes years, without receiving a hug that is not a prelude to sex. Without a caress on the face that doesn't come with expectation. Without someone holding their hand just because, with no agenda, no transaction embedded. There is a world where the last non-sexual touch a man received was from the barber, or a professional handshake, or perhaps from his mother 6 months ago. This has a name: chronic touch deprivation. Touch starvation. And it is not poetry, it is not exaggeration, it is a documented condition, with real consequences for the body and the mind. It increases cortisol, lowers immunity, raises anxiety, depression, aggressiveness. The human body was not made to live isolated inside its own skin. But for millions of men, this is everyday reality. And then society turns around and asks, why are you so obsessed with sex? The confusion is inevitable. When the only form of physical contact available is sexual, when the only moment you are touched with intention and presence is during the sexual act, your brain begins to make dangerous connections. Affection becomes synonymous with sex. Emotional need is translated as arousal. The desperation to be hugged, to be caressed, to feel the warmth of another body without performance, without purpose, without a goal, all of this gets compressed and distorted into a single release valve. And then comes the judgment. Comes the accusation that men sexualize everything. That they don't know how to differentiate friendship from attraction. That they interpret any kindness as a green light. And maybe there is truth in that. But the question no one asks is, who taught them this language? Who created a world where affection is rationed, where vulnerability is punished, where the only permission to need another human being comes wrapped in sexual desire? If you followed this far and feel that this resonates in some way, leave your like on the video, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and comment below which city or country you're watching from. Let's see how far this conversation goes. Because what we are about to uncover is not just about relationships. It is about how we build masculinity on top of emotional deprivation and then ask ourselves why men are dying inside. It is about a system that works so well that it has become invisible. And it is about the most uncomfortable question of all. If men really only want sex, why are so many of them willing to give up everything just to be truly hugged? Let's talk about something that happens every day in millions of homes, but rarely goes by this name: emotional conditioning. It works like this: when he does something that pleases, he receives affection. A hug in the morning, a loving message, maybe a caress on the couch at night. When he fails, forgets something, disagrees, doesn't meet expectations, the affection evaporates. Silence. Physical distance. Short replies. A body beside him in bed, but millions of kilometers away emotionally. It's not always conscious. Often it isn't even malicious. But the pattern is there, operating like invisible software. Good behavior generates affection, bad behavior results in deprivation. And for someone who already lives in an economy of emotional scarcity, where affection is the only resource that truly matters, this is not just control. It is conditioned survival. It is Pavlov with human feelings. And here is what this creates: men who no longer know whether they are loved for who they are or for what they do. Men who internalize the idea that affection is something to be earned, conquered, never simply received. That love is conditional by nature. That their presence, their existence, is not enough. They must perform, produce, get things right, to be entitled to the basic touch that keeps human beings functional. The consequence of this is devastating. When affection becomes a currency of power, relationships stop being partnerships and become transactions. There is no real intimacy when one party is constantly calculating, if I do this, will I receive that? There is no vulnerability when showing weakness means losing access to the only source of human contact available. And there is no genuine love when the person beside you only touches you on the days you deserve it. But the problem goes beyond individual relationships. Because this dynamic does not begin in adulthood. It begins in childhood. Studies show that boys receive significantly less physical affection from parents than girls, especially after the age of 5. The message is clear and repeated: men don't need this. Men are tough. Men handle things on their own. And if you need a hug, a lap to rest on, someone to hold you when the world feels too heavy, well, maybe you're not man enough. This emotional education through deprivation creates generations of men who don't know how to name what they feel, who don't know how to ask for what they need, who learn to translate every effective need into sexual language because that is the only one allowed. You can't say, I need to be hugged, but you can initiate sex. You can't cry and ask for comfort, but you can seek physical intimacy. Desire becomes camouflage for need. And then society looks at this and confirms, see? Men only want one thing. The truth is that many men are so disconnected from their own emotional needs that they no longer know how to distinguish them. What he feels, is it arousal or loneliness? Sexual desire or hunger for affection? Physical attraction or desperation to be seen as a complete human being? Everything blends into a foggy confusion where the only certainty is, maybe if I have sex, this pain will go away for a few hours. And it won't. It never will. Because sex without emotional intimacy does not heal affective deprivation. It's like trying to quench thirst by eating salt. It relieves for seconds, then the emptiness comes back even stronger. But he doesn't know how to articulate this. He doesn't have the vocabulary to say, I don't want to have sex, I want to lie on your lap and be stroked until I fall asleep. Because men who say these things are called weak, needy, childish, problematic. So he learns to perform the role. Learns to be the stereotype expected of him. Learns that showing emotional need is repellent, but demonstrating sexual desire is masculine and acceptable. And in the process, he loses access to his own humanity. He becomes the caricature everyone expected him to be. And then they point and say, see? We were right about you all along. It is a perfect cycle. Deprive someone of something essential. Then condemn them when that person develops dysfunctional mechanisms to deal with the deprivation. Use those mechanisms as evidence that the person never deserved what was denied. And start all over again. Entire generations trapped in this pattern, believing it is natural, that it has always been this way, that men are simply made different. Now let's get to the point no one wants to admit. There is a hidden benefit in keeping men emotionally starved. Because a man deprived of affection is a controllable man. He is a man who will work overtime to earn a smile. Who will suppress his own boundaries so as not to risk losing the little affection he receives. Who will accept emotional crumbs and call it love because it's all he knows. This is not conspiracy theory. It is basic power dynamics. When you control access to what someone desperately needs to survive emotionally, you control that person. And the cruelest part is that this doesn't even need to be conscious. The system perpetuates itself. Women who were taught that men are emotionally shallow animals will treat their partners as such. Men who are treated this way will internalize that they don't deserve better. And the cycle continues, generation after generation. But here is where the narrative gets complicated in ways that will make a lot of people uncomfortable. This does not mean that women are villains. It means that all of us were raised inside a sick system. Women suffer from it too, just in different ways. They were taught that they must be emotionally available to everyone except themselves. That they need to carry the emotional weight of entire relationships on their own. That expressing their own needs is selfish. And when you put two groups traumatized in opposite ways into the same relationship, what do you expect? One is starving emotionally, the other is exhausted from feeding the entire world. One doesn't know how to ask for what he needs, the other doesn't know how to stop giving until she is depleted. And in the middle of all this, both blame each other for the disaster that neither of them created. The truth is that men are dying. Literally. Male suicide rates are frighteningly higher. Epidemic loneliness affects men disproportionately. Men live shorter lives, get sicker, have fewer close friends, fewer support networks, less social permission to be vulnerable. And when they finally collapse, when the mask of toughness falls, they are called weak, needy, problematic. There is a brutal statistic that illustrates this perfectly. Divorced men die younger, have higher rates of depression and suicide, while divorced women often report improvements in mental and physical health. Why? Because for many men, their partner was the only source of emotional connection. The only person who touched them. The only one with whom they could show any vulnerability. When that ends, they return to the absolute emotional desert. And then comes the part that is truly frightening. Many men prefer to stay in toxic, even abusive relationships rather than face the emptiness of not being touched by anyone. They prefer poisoned crumbs to total starvation. And this is not love. It is desperation. It is what happens when you deprive a human being of what they need to function for so long that they completely lose their sense of what a healthy relationship is. But wait. Because here is the turn no one sees coming. This same deprivation that makes men vulnerable to manipulation can also be the key to liberation. When a man finally understands that his hunger for affection is not weakness, not pathology, not something to be ashamed of, when he names it, when he demands it as a basic human right, not as a favor to be earned, the entire system begins to crack. Because the power of the narrative men only want sex depends on men believing it. It depends on them reducing their own complex needs to sexual impulse. It depends on them being so ashamed of their own emotions that they never articulate them clearly. The moment a man looks at his partner and says without shame, without detours, "I need non-sexual affection, I need to be hugged, I need touch that leads nowhere, and this is non-negotiable," the entire dynamic changes. But that requires courage. It requires confronting years of conditioning. It requires risking rejection. It requires accepting that he may discover that he is not loved for who he is, only for what he does. And that truth can be devastating. But it can also be liberating. Because you cannot fix what you refuse to admit is broken. So let's get straight to the point. What really changes when we stop pretending that men are sexual machines and start treating them as complete human beings? Everything. Absolutely everything. First, we need to destroy the idea that recognizing male emotional needs is whining or victimhood. It isn't. It's the bare minimum of human dignity. If you can understand that denying someone water for days will leave that person desperate, obsessive, willing to do anything for a sip, then you already understand what affection deprivation does to human beings. It's not complicated. It's basic physiology. Our bodies need touch. Our brains need connection. This is not optional. And here is the brutal irony. When men finally receive genuine affection, non-transactional, non-conditional, something surprising happens. They stop being desperate for sex. They stop hypersexualizing everything. They stop confusing affection with foreplay. Because the real hunger has been satisfied. They can finally differentiate. This is a hug, that is desire. They are separate things and both are valid. But to reach that point, relationships need to be rebuilt on completely different foundations. Affection cannot be a reward. Touch cannot be conditional. You don't hug your partner because he earned it today. You hug him because he exists, because he is human, because physical connection is as necessary as breathing. And if you are using affection as a tool of manipulation, consciously or not, you are not in a partnership. You are in a power relationship disguised as love. The change begins with a simple but radical question. When was the last time you touched your partner without wanting anything in return? Without initiating something sexual, without asking for something, without rewarding good behavior? Just because he was there, existing, being human? If the answer takes time to come, if you need to stop and think, then we already have a problem. Because this should be as natural as breathing. And for men, when was the last time you asked for what you truly needed? Not what you learned to ask for, not what is socially acceptable, but what your body and your soul are screaming for. When did you have the courage to say, "Today I just need to be hugged, nothing more, just that"? Because as long as you don't name this need, as long as you keep translating everything into sexual language because it's the only one you learned, you'll remain hungry even while eating. The most powerful lesson here is this: vulnerability is not weakness. It is the only thing that builds real intimacy. And real intimacy is what all of us are desperately looking for when we have sex, thinking it will fill the void. It won't. It never will. Because the void is not sexual. It is emotional. It is human. And it can only be filled with genuine presence, not with performance. Now, this does not mean that all women consciously manipulate or that all men are innocent victims. It means that we are all operating within systems that hurt us in different ways. And if we want out of this, we need brutal honesty. We need men who have the courage to be vulnerable even when it goes against everything they were taught. And we need women willing to see beyond the stereotype and recognize the full humanity of the person beside them. Because in the end, this story is not about who is right or wrong. It is about how we built an entire society on the emotional dehumanization of half the population and are now surprised by the results. It is about how we turned basic human needs into signs of weakness and then wonder why people are breaking. Men don't just want sex. They want to be chosen. They want to be touched with tenderness. They want to wake up and be hugged without having to have done anything to earn it. They want to cry without being called weak. They want to be complete human beings, not caricatures of toxic masculinity. And until we manage to build a world where this is possible, we will keep pretending the problem is libido when in truth it has always been loneliness. If this video made you think differently about something, leave that like, subscribe to the channel for more reflections like this, and comment which city or country you're watching from. Sometimes the most necessary conversations are the most uncomfortable ones. And maybe that's exactly why we need to have them.